This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. We are wrapping up June here at the Dover Download Podcast, and Mike has allowed me to rejoin the recap at the end of the month. Mike Gillis, how are you today?
I am well, Chris, and thanks for coming back because I don't know that I could have, or anyone could have survived another week with me. So.
I doubt that. I saw the ratings. So June, traditionally a slower month here in the city because the council has adopted a budget and it takes a breather. So they only have one meeting in the month. And the planning board typically, at least my experience when I was the planning director, is that you have winter and spring gear up for developers that want to do summer projects. So you start to see a little bit of slowdown there. Looking at the agendas, I think that's kind of been the case this month.
Actually, in some ways, it's unusually slow because the council only had one regular meeting in June. Typically, there's two, but they did have a special meeting and a workshop at the beginning of June on the 3rd. And the special meeting was really to cover a procedural vote on the waterfront TIF. Just the authorization for that hadn't been published in all the right places. So this was more of a housekeeping measure to make sure that the $6 million that they've got for the waterfront TIF is bonded appropriately. They did also take that opportunity to add the support for
one House Bill.
Yeah, House Bill 1491. Yeah, right. For the risk pools. And the waterfront TIF, maybe you just want to explain briefly about why they needed to do that, but also because it's an important part of what we're talking about here, and it came up during the budget, obviously, what it entails.
Financially, the way the waterfront project has worked is that while the city has debt financed all of the improvements, the roadway, the utilities, Nebi Park, etc., that debt has been issued as a tax increment financing bond. So the intention is that unlike a typical bond where the general fund, the taxpayers, myself included, part of our tax bill goes to paying our debt as a community, in a tax increment financing district, only those properties directly affected by the expenditure repay the expenditure through a segregation of their property taxes into what we call a fifth bucket. So you have the school, city, state, school, and county taxes. That's the four typical buckets property taxes go into. And in a TIF district, that remains the same, but then any increment, any growth above a baseline that was calculated, in this case, it was calculated about 10 years ago, that growth goes into an tax increment financing bucket, and that pays the debt service. So that, coupled with the fact that what we do is we get authorization from the council to expend funds and to bond those funds, but we don't bond them until we actually need the funding. So it's a cash flow conversation. So years ago, the council authorized $6 million of debt to the tax increment financing district for the waterfront, and the finance department did not issue that debt, did not seek a bank to finance that debt until it was actually needed, because why pay interest on something that you don't need? Right. So now that we're wrapping up the project and the cash flow is at a point where we need to issue the debt, it was discovered that there was a noticing provision that we could not find the Foster's notice from the time when the council elected to support the debt. And so while the bond council said that it could work, it's always best to go back and dot I's, cross T's, etc. So you're right, Mike. The council had a special meeting on the 3rd to forward that onto the 10th, in which case they held a public hearing, etc., and processed. But that's what the main part of that meeting was, and it was coupled with a workshop where we talked about stormwater management, particularly with regards to Great Bay, and the nutrient loading and the work that the Piscataqua Estuaries program has done here with community services and other members of the city. And then an update on the Toland Road landfill, which is a Superfund site located at the end of Toland Road by the Barrington-Madbury town lines. This was a landfill that the city operated between mid 60s and the late 70s, early 80s. And it was actually old home day for me because Dean Pichelle, who was our environmental consultant for that project, he worked for the city and I worked for Dean in the late 90s, actually on the Toland Road landfill project, mapping out different gases and contaminants. So it was an update on that and the remediation, and we had our consultants available to answer questions. It was a good opportunity for the council, particularly with half of them being new, or approximately half of them being new, to learn about this important expenditure, because it is a fairly high expenditure that the citizens have to make every year to help with the closure and the obligations for that landfill.
In the workshop, of course, preceded the vote later that month where they authorized about $530,000 from the unassigned fund balance for expenses for the Toland landfill. So this was, as you say, a good opportunity to learn, because this is a long-term environmental and financial obligation for the city, as well as the other parties involved.
And I think it's interesting. You mentioned the two House bills that were also discussed that night. 1491, which the council supported and sent a letter to the governor urging her to sign, which she ended up vetoing that. And then 1588, which was a zoning bill, basically that allows a developer to put residential in a commercial zone with less restrictions than the communities might already have in place. And the council opposed that one, urging that it was a attack on local control, and that passed the House. And so that's still going through the process, but just a quick update on where we've been over the past couple of weeks on that.
And as a brief aside related to that, obviously we learned this week that the case involving the risk pools can proceed.
Also in the month of June, the planning board met twice, and they had a couple different actions before them. Probably most predominant was the Cocheco Falls Mill, centrally located downtown. They have over the years sought to convert underutilized commercial and industrial space into residential space, and there was a request to take what they call canal-level space, which is below grade. It was warehousing and storage and industrial space, and they sought approval and received conditional approval to convert that to residential. They continue to have excess parking on their various lots throughout the community, and so they didn't need any relief for that. And my understanding is the planning board had some good questions, but ultimately unanimously approved that, recognizing that it's continuing our goal to encourage residential downtown to help keep the vibrant downtown we have.
Yeah, and it's probably another good example of adaptive reuse, right? Which we talk about from time to time. Probably one of the other items that generated some discussion was the Uncommon Drive site plan amendment. That had been before the planning board in May and then obviously continued to June. There was some additional discussion about this and some public comment as well. But ultimately, the planning board decided to continue this to July 28th. So,
interestingly, the second planning board meeting of the month had a very rare occurrence, and that was a 4-4 tie vote, which for those of you who have not experienced it, it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
For those of you that have not experienced, a tie is not a win or a loss. It is a non-decision. And so the board ultimately has to revisit the item and determine if the yays or nays can convince the other side, or they offer it back to the applicant to try to make changes and to come back and help with that conversation. But the planning director reached out to me and she said, when was the last time you remember a tie? And I probably said zero.
Yeah.
Because it is such a rare occurrence. Denials, sure, those are rare too, but they have occurred. But a 4-4 tie, that's not something you see. And I'm not trying to make it sound like a blue moon, but
it's very rare. It's very rare. What's interesting about that one, I mean, it was just a conditional use permit. It's for 7 Church Street, but the property itself, and I maybe can briefly mention this in lieu of This Week in History, is, that's the former Samuel Wyatt house, which is actually on the National Register of Historic Places. And a pretty significant property with a really interesting history, which I won't get into here. We'll probably save it for another this week in Dover history. But Samuel Wyatt was a really interesting character from Dover's past, and the house itself has an interesting history. After it was Samuel Wyatt's, it passed through several different owners, but all of them recognizing it had some significant historical value to the community. But again, that was just a conditional use permit. Where it goes from here, Chris, I don't know. With a 4-4 tie, like you said, it just means that it's unsettled, as opposed to, in some cases, a tie vote usually means that it fails.
Right, right. But the land use statutes are pretty clear that in a land use case, it is a non-action. So the Waterfront Committee did not meet, but I want to pass on that we are expecting a July 14th ribbon cutting ceremony for Nebi Park. Things are on track. That project is really wrapping up. And as I say this, and as you hear this, we are in punch list stage, which means that the major work has wrapped up. Hopefully, as you're listening to this, the pavement is finally down on most of River Street. But that project is coming to an end, and really we will see the public enjoy the fruits of its labor and the TIF district's labor, to call back to earlier on this episode. But that project is a long time coming, and really offer congratulations to the community for all the efforts behind the design, the implementation, and now the enjoyment of a huge asset to the community. I was thinking about it last night. You and I recently were both at a sort of unveiling for the pool, the outdoor pool. Both of them cost about the same amount of money. They both cost between $3.5 and $4 million all totaled. We got a great outdoor pool asset, refurbished, rehabbed in a brand new 3-acre park with a pavilion building and very nice amenities for the community to enjoy.
And for anyone who wants a sneak peek, because technically Nebi Park is still closed to the public while the work continues, there is a virtual tour that people can watch. This is really an update from something we had done back in the fall recently with the project manager, Jamie Stevens, walking through the property, where you can really see the changes that have been made, specifically at Nebi Park in the pavilion. Very impressive, and I think something the community can and will be proud of. There was no zoning board meeting in June. School board did meet. They had their one regular meeting on June 8th, which is typically for them more of a end of the year kind of wrap up session, where they handle a lot of sort of the end of the year items. Among them are usually retirements. Probably worth noting that of I think there were 16 retirements that the school board accepted, which was a combined 369 years of service to the community. Wow. So, just thanks to all of those teachers and educators who have spent many, many years here in our schools.
A few episodes ago, Mike, we had Deanna Strand from Dover Adult Learning, and I think I said it on that episode how much I enjoy their graduation process. My wife and I went to the graduation recently, and once again, it was a great event to take part in and to enjoy. You can really appreciate what people go through to get that high school education. It's wonderful when a traditional process is used. It's fascinating to me when someone goes through the process in a alternative mode. There's a gentleman that was 71 years old that got his diploma, and that's just amazing.
It really is. As someone who's filmed many of the Dover Adult Learning Center graduations over the years, it really is unlike not that, a traditional graduation, like a high school graduation, for instance, isn't emotional. These are really emotional ceremonies where you can really get a sense for the impact that the work that is accomplished is felt by the families and certainly by the graduates. And it's a really, really moving experience. And speaking of graduation, it was discussed at the school board meeting. It was shortly before the graduation was held. It was held later that week, but Dover High School did hold its commencement ceremony at the Whittemore Center in Durham. For the graduating class, very well attended graduation ceremony and emotional in its own way. We did broadcast that live here. For those wondering, it has over the years from time to time been at the Whittemore Center. Of course, it is there this year because Dunaway Field is obviously not there at the moment.
Right.
But
come the fall, it will be.
Come the fall, it will be. The Joint Building Committee for the athletic complex at the high school has been meeting as well, and they say they're on track and still under budget. In fact, I think because they've been under budget on some aspects of the project, they were able to find money for lighting for the baseball field.
Right. Exactly. I think we have pretty much covered what's coverable in the month of June.
Yeah, I think that's it, Chris. A light month, that doesn't mean there wasn't a lot going on. I mean, there always is, and as always, we're just sort of covering the surface of what really is going on with all our boards, committees, and commissions. There's a lot of work going on all the time, and appreciate all of those volunteers who help keep the city moving forward. We are a very blessed community to have the volunteerism we do, and we thank everyone as they enjoy their summer. We'll catch up with everyone in July. Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.